Good afternoon, everyone, and happy Friday. Welcome back to Adobe Live. My name's Howard Pinsky, Senior XD Evangelist here at Adobe, and I hope you're all doing well on this, as Cornell puts it, Fancy Friday. I'm excited to be back for another Adobe XD Masterclass. Today's going to be a fun one, and a little bit different than usual. We're actually going to be diving straight into Auto-Animate, and we're going to be building out a video intro. Now, before I get to that, I do want to say a big hello to everyone joining me here on Behance. We've got Jay and Cornell and Cody and Julia and Colleen, Vipin and Avila. And who else do we have in here? Tia. If I missed anyone, I do apologize. Where's my glasses? That's a good question. I have no idea. They're around somewhere. It's been a pretty busy day. I don't know. They're somewhere. Thankfully, I don't need the glasses to see. They're mainly for blue light blocking. I got LASIK not too long ago, so I've got super laser vision. Hey Fabian, welcome, and Laura, great to see all of you. So I'm gonna hop over to my screen, boop, there we go. And here's Twitter. Not to just promote my Twitter account, but I did post this on Twitter. When did I post this? I don't know, a little bit ago. A few days ago, I think. And this is what we're gonna be creating today. Probably not the entire thing, I don't know if we'll have time for that, but let me go ahead and play this. And this is a new video intro I've been working on for the videos. And my latest video that came out is using the intro. Ooh, Juhi almost forgot there's a masterclass, but he made it. Thank you. And if anyone's joining for the very first time, let me know. I would love to hear that. I love when people are tuning in for the first time, never seen one of these before, and hopefully you're soaking up some information. If you are new, these are typically a little bit more advanced than some of our other live streams, but it's always a good time. We have a lot of master classes on Friday, from video to photo to photography. What else do we have? I'm sure I'm missing somebody, but all of the evangelists are streaming on Fridays. It's a good time. So we're going to be creating this today. Charles is new. Oh, Juhi's a she. I apologize. I do apologize there. Andres from Germany. Great to see. The Boop Army. Oh, I like that. Hashtag Boop Army. As long as it's not a violent Boop Army, I am okay with that. All right, so we're going to hop over to Adobe XD, and we are going to get started. And if anyone has questions throughout this stream, definitely let me know. Again, this is going to be a little bit more, it's going to be a little bit different than some of the others. Destiny from Philadelphia, welcome. All right, so for this one, because the main focus of this is to be a video intro, I do want it to make sure that it's 16 by 9, so it fits nicely on a video, right? That's the word I'm looking for. Elisa from Russia, welcome. So I'm gonna hop in. Actually, before I do that, you might notice that the welcome screen looks a little bit different. Not only do we have new social presets, which is fantastic, especially if you're building out assets for Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, but we also have a new Learn tab. And this is wild. Going into an Adobe product and seeing my face right there and seeing a bunch of the content that I've produced. It's just wild. It's been a crazy journey. I've been trying to get to this stage for like 12 years, and to see my face in an application made by Adobe, it's kind of cool. But anyways, back to this. What I do want is to do web 1920 by 1080. Even though it says web, the video dimensions are exactly the same, 1920 by 1080. So I'm gonna go ahead and press that. It's gonna launch a new artboard, and here we go. Here is our lovely large artboard. Now I'm gonna block out a few elements first. We're not gonna probably get too deep into some of those elements. If you remember on the actual intro, there's like the layers panel or the assets panel over to the left, and there's also the properties inspector over to the right. I did block in some of those elements just to keep it nice and clean. I don't think we're gonna sit there and add every single rectangle today, unless we do have time. We might blow through this, but you never know. But I'm gonna show you the final result afterwards. But what I will do is I'm going to just drag out an area just like that. This is going to be for the assets panel. And what I could do also is just use my eyedropper tool, shortcut key I, and just sample. So if I go ahead and open the assets panel, I can just sample that color there, right? Just so I have consistency. And I can drag this across, excuse me, for the properties inspector. Now, considering this area here is going to act as kind of like the canvas up here in XD, what I can do is I can double click on the actual artboard and just sample the canvas color, just like that. It's already looking like Adobe XD. And did you know, fun fact, Adobe XD is designed using Adobe XD. Crazy, isn't it? Now, in the middle here, we may want to simulate what an artboard looks like. And for that, we can grab our rectangle, always with the rectangle, right? And I'm gonna just draw one out just like this. That looks pretty good. And I wanna make sure that the border is consistent with the border of an actual artboard. So I'm gonna press the eyedropper beside border and just really get in there, right? I love how the magnification allows you to see exactly what you're gonna be clicking on, and boop, there we go. And we now have an artboard. Look, it's already looking like XD. It's fantastic. So in the center here, if we refer back, Arbor says, what came first, the design or XD? That's a good question. I believe, I'm sure at some point, the actual mock-up for Adobe XD, at least the first version, was probably designed in either Photoshop or Illustrator. I should probably ask somebody that. But once that was done and the very basic version of XD was created, everything else was designed in XD. So if you take a look at the actual intro, you know, we start off with this kind of cool little cursor right about here, and then it drags out the actual shape of the XD logo. So what we're gonna do, Andre says, rectangle to start, a good day. I agree. So for the cursor, we're going to start with a polygon. Now you might be thinking, well, why are you dragging out a rectangle or a triangle for something like this? And I'm gonna show you why. So with the polygon tool, you can not only round out the corners a little bit, but you can also control how many sides this has. You can do the star radius if you wanted to. We don't need a star, right? But over here to the right within the properties inspector, we do have the ability to change the number of sides. So I'm going to go ahead and press 4. Now Fabian is asking, I haven't been able to make it work horizontal scrolling in Windows. I don't know why. So Fabian, make sure your XD is up to date. There was an update that came out not too long ago. I believe it was 30.2, I want to say, that added support for horizontal scrolling in Windows. So when you launch your preview window, all you have to do is just click and then drag within a scroll group to scroll. So make sure you're up to date. We also released XD31 not too long ago. And if I go up to About XD, we've got XD31 here. I actually have XD32 on my other monitor, but I can't tell you that. So we've got here that looks pretty good, but whoops. But of course we want to turn this into some sort of a cursor. Now what we could also do is use a plugin, and we can just, let's say, type out pointer or point, or there's a lot of different things we can type out. But if we do want to make sure to get the cursor kind of looking right, here's what we can do. We can kind of rotate this so that we have something that looks like this possibly, because the left side is actually a little bit up and down. But then we want to start kind of tweaking this. So what I can do, now that I have the rounded corners in place, I can double click on this and I can start molding this to my liking. So I can move this down if I wanted to, right? I can move this kind of up here, and all of a sudden we're kind of getting some sort of a pointer looking thing, right? Now, of course, the corners are a little bit weird. So in this case, this one here, we definitely don't need any sort of rounded corners. So I can just double click on this and make sure that this here is in there, right? So I can kind of tweak these and move them around until I get that. That doesn't look very good, does it? But I can just go ahead and tweak these. There we go. That's a little bit better. Well, sort of. Move these around like that. Move that down a touch. Move that up. There we go. Now we're kind of getting somewhere. I don't want to spend too much time working on this pointer because, again, you can very easily just grab an icon and you're good to go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cheat a little bit. I'm going to grab it from the actual file and I'm going to pop it here. Look at that. We did an icon. We did a little pointer in just like a minute, right? Nobody saw that. It just appeared there, right? Again, grab an icon if you need to. There's a million pointers floating around the web, but that's basically how I created that pointer. I used the polygon tool, added 4 sides, and there we go, right? We'll grab some coffee. All right, so we've got our, I'm knocking down my chapstick. We've got our pointer, looking pretty good. Now, of course, we want to create the initial state for our logo. And if you remember, hopping over here, it starts out nice and square because I want to show that process of, oh, my boop shirt. Thank you, Cody. So I want to show the process of actually rounding out those corners. So over here, what we're gonna do, we're gonna call this pointer. This will be called Artboard. Hope I'm not late. You are not late, Newman. Welcome. What are we doing today? Oh boy, that's a loaded question. So we are creating this. We are creating this, as much of it as we can, actually. This animated intro that I created in XD. There we go. Do you like light roast or dark roast? You know what? I don't even know what I'm drinking. I order from Bones Coffee. It's pretty good. This is the gingerbread flavor. I don't know if it's light roast or dark. I want to say it's probably dark, but I don't know. I don't know anything about coffee. It just tastes good and keeps me awake, so I'm happy. All right, so what we're going to do is we are going to grab the rectangle and we are going to drag one out. I'm going to hold down my shift key to constrain it to a perfect square, just like that. I'm going to position it somewhere in the center of this artboard. Let me move my pointer. There we go. Someone's asking, will there be an option for child components to have the ability, if I update the default state, it updates the other states? Yes. So the short answer is yes. The long answer is there are a lot of updates going into components right now. I've been playing around with some of them. The team is working really hard, especially on nested components. A lot of that stuff is actively in the works and will be released over time. But that in specific, internally it's called horizontal syncing, where if you update the state, let's say a default state, and it also update the hover state. The answer is yes, that is in the works, but I don't know exactly when it's going to be released, but it'll happen. All right, so we've got our shape here, and I could go ahead and sample the color of Adobe XD, which I do have down here. Not that one. That's a fancy top secret version one. But I'm going to go ahead and just sample this color here, just so I have the right Adobe XD color. I also have a file with the vector version of XD, which I'll bring in later. But I do now have the actual logo. And I use this to kind of set the stage for the second state. So what I'm going to do is I've got my pointer, and in this state where it draws it out, it's actually going to be right at the end. So I'm going to put the pointer right about here, and this is essentially going to be the second state. Now, the way XD works with Auto-Animate is it uses an artboard to artboard relationship, right? At least for now. The team is exploring many different ways to improve animation in XD. And if you're using After Effects, it's a little bit different than that. And a lot of people ask me, why are you doing this in XD versus After Effects? And, the answer is simple. I feel more comfortable working in Adobe XD than I do in After Effects. I love After Effects for certain things, but XD I can just design, link up the two artboards, and it may take a little bit more space, but for me it works. So I'm going to duplicate this artboard over, and then all you have to do is set up the first state. So sometimes it works best if you go backwards, right? So we started with this state, and then we're going to go on to this state here. So I'm going to move this cursor, or this pointer, right to this top left corner, and I'm just going to bring this in, right? Just like that. So it's kind of hidden behind that pointer. Look at that, right? You can't even see it. And I should go ahead and name this. I'm going to name this XD icon. Now, this brings up an interesting point. Pointer. So I have both artboards, right? And I went ahead and renamed one of the layers on one of the artboards. So I renamed that purple box XD icon on this artboard, but I did not rename it on this artboard. So if I were to go to wire this up, which we're going to do now, we're going to go into prototype mode, and I'm simply going to drag this handle over to the next artboard. And for this, I want it to kick off after a certain amount of time. So I'm going to use the time trigger, which is only available on an artboard level. So keep that in mind. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to set it to around 0.6 seconds possibly, just to give it a little bit of time so when the preview launches, it doesn't kick off right away and we miss it. And I want to make sure to choose, what am I doing? Auto-Animate, that's what I'm doing. That way XD looks at the differences between the two artboards and makes those changes. However, we're getting to what I'm trying to get to in a second. Let's go for in and out, and that's say 0.6 seconds. So what XD is going to do when I launch the preview, it's going to look at the differences between similar layers on both artboards and animate the changes, right? Now, because I went ahead and renamed one of the layers on this artboard and did not rename it on this artboard, it's not going to work as expected. So if I go ahead and press play, the pointer moves, right? But this shape simply cross-faded in. And that is expected based on the behavior that I performed just a few seconds ago. So what you have to make sure to do is make sure that the layer names and also layer types, and I've spoke about this before, across the artboards that are wired up for Auto-Animate are the same. So now I can press play and we've got this fun little animation, right? Lorem Ipsum, welcome Lorem Ipsum. I'm a big fan of your, I don't know what you even call it, your fake text. Are there any plans to allow hand sketching in XD? That would be kind of cool. I don't know of any immediate plans to allow hand sketching, although there is a plugin called the Whiteboard plugin. And if I hop over here, this is made by a team inside of Adobe. They did a great job, but they have a draw option, and you don't need a whiteboard template to use this. You can open the draw section. I have an artboard selected. I'm going to press start drawing. So if you want to give feedback to somebody, you can just, draw like this and just draw. Of course, if you have a Wacom tablet, this sucks, right? It's hard with a trackpad, but if you have a Wacom tablet, it's a little bit easier. And if you press done, it's going to add that, what is it called? Drawing, that's the word, directly on your artboard. It's vector too, so you can change the color to red if you really want to make sure someone sees it. And if you're working with co-editing, it's even better. Someone's asking why components added to other component default states and edited go to stock state if I create. I'm not exactly sure what that means. Try to clarify that, but going back to what I was talking about earlier when I answered your other question, is there are a lot of changes and updates being made to components, so especially nested components. So if something's not working as intended right now, there's a very good chance that it's going to be fixed at some point in the future. All right, so going back to this, basically after the square has been drawn out, what I want to do, because if you have an object selected like this, or if you draw out an object like this, right, when you deselect it, it shows you the bounds and these little handles on the outside. I keep almost knocking over my coffee. Maybe that's a sign to drink more. And it also has the handles on the inside to round out the corners, right? And Cornell is asking, right now animations are A to B along a straight line. Will be there be a way to set animations path manually? So probably at some point. I don't know exactly when. All I do know is that the team is exploring and working on additional animation features right now. I don't know when that's going to come. Probably won't come next month. Probably won't come anytime soon. But there's a lot of cool things that they're working on that I can't talk about just yet, but stuff is in the works. So I want to be able to mimic that, right? So I'm going to duplicate this artboard one more time. And for this, all I want to do is just kind of replicate the bounds of an object that's being selected, right? So what I'm going to do to make my life easier, I'm going to duplicate this current shape, and I'm going to turn off the fill, and I'm going to set the border. And I can just sample one of these blues that's used in Adobe XD, right? And I do want to make the border quite a bit thicker, only because when you're zoomed out, you want to be able to really see it. If I were to do 1 pixel, which is typically what that border is anyway, 1 or 2 pixels, it's gonna be a little bit difficult to see. So I'm gonna really bump it up. And let's see, are you working on making components respect layer component other, probably. If I'm understanding correctly, that's probably what the team is working on. Again, they're working on a lot of really cool stuff to help with the component process, but I can't talk about it just yet. So we've got that done. And now we want to basically create these little handles on the outside of a shape, right? And I want to make sure, just name these accordingly, bounds. And now, on the outside, we're going to grab an ellipse, draw one out. Again, I'm emphasizing it a little bit, so it's going to be a little bit larger than it typically would be. But I do want to make sure that it's easily seeable, if that's a word, when zoomed out. There we go. Drag that across like that. And then I can copy these, drag those down, and right in the center. Bam. There we go. Is there an option to get the preferred downloaded plugin installed automatically every time when we log into new system install? So the short answer is not yet. The long answer, not much long answer, but that is in the works. So eventually you'll be able to sync your plugins over the cloud. Don't know exactly when that's coming, just like many things. I don't like giving exact dates when features are shipping. One, because I'm probably not allowed to, and two, things always get shifted around. You know, if something isn't working as intended 5 days before the release, they'll pull it, right? So I wouldn't want to commit to something if I don't know for sure that it's going to ship. All right, so I'm going to group all these and call this bounds. I can't spell today. Bounds. There we go. Fancy, right? All right, so we have that done, but we also want to make sure to get these little circles on the inside of a shape active, right? So we can drag those in to round out the corners. And they're a little bit different than the ones that we just created, but not too much different. So what I can do is I can just duplicate this inwards. If I hold down my Alt key or Option key, I can make sure that they're lined up perfectly. That looks pretty good. 16 pixels. 16 pixels. There we go. Now, actually, what I want to do before I do that, because there is a little dot in the center, right? Looks like you aligned the lines. Yeah. Oh, so how are you aligning that? So Destiny's asking, how are you aligning that? So one of the cool things about XD is there's these smart guides. So as I'm moving things around, you're noticing these smart guides are appearing, and those are on by default. And it's basically telling me that this object now is nicely aligned with the ones at the top or at the bottom. And if I move it down, now it's also aligned to the center of this shape as well. As long as they're in the same group or within the same artboard, not part of a different group, those smart guides will help you out throughout that process. So I'm going to duplicate this. I don't need a border for this one, but I do want to fill it in with our nice blue and just drag that down like that. Perfect. All right. And this will be called, what am I going to call this? Rounded handle. That probably makes zero sense, but we're going to run with it. So I'm going to duplicate this over to the right, make sure it's 16 pixels. Beautiful. And then just simply duplicate this up. Boop. There we go. Beautiful. Again, I'm making these larger than they're actually inside of, by the way, add Alt key measuring thing to all Adobe products. That'd be, I mean, Photoshop has something similar. I don't know about Illustrator or some of the other products, but definitely, you know, suggest that to the team as well. But, you know, it's nice that it's in Adobe XD. All right, so we have this set up, right? And it looks pretty good. Again, we're emphasizing it. We're really making it stronger than it typically would be because that's the type of intro we're going for. And I basically want, when this artboard finishes, when the transition completes, it's going to automatically transition to this artboard. So I'm going to go to prototype mode. And from the second artboard, I want to drag my handle over to the third. And I do want a time trigger, but I actually want it to kick off immediately. So I'm going to set the delay to 0 seconds. And I don't want an auto-animate because nothing's really going to be animating. So I'm actually going to switch that to a transition. And we don't want to dissolve, we just want none, which is essentially going to be cut. We're just going to cut right to it. And now if I start this process again, whoop, whoop, right? Did something move? Let me try that again. I think I moved the artboard by mistake. Let me just make sure that it's centered. Bam. Look at that. Fancy. Juhi is asking, do you think Sketch is overrated? Honestly, I haven't used Sketch personally in quite a while. All I know is that many of the design tools in the industry are fantastic and they serve different purposes for the most part. And, you know, competition is good, especially some of the competition from, you know, Figma, Sketch, InVision. It's all pushing everyone else forward. So I wouldn't say it's overrated. I just don't use it, so it's hard to tell. But I love XD, and it works for me. So, and if you love Sketch, you know, by all means, use it. I would encourage you to try out all of them. But for me personally, I love Adobe XD. It just works for me. Destiny says, fancy, fancy. I agree. All right, so we've got that done. And the next thing, essentially what we want is we want this pointer to move over here to one of the handles on the inside so that we can start rounding out those corners, right? And Jui's saying I switch from Sketch to XD and prefer XD. That's great. Again, down to personal preference and down to what works for you and your team. And if it's XD, wonderful. If it's something else, also wonderful. I'm big about using whatever works for you. You're never going to hear me say you need to use Adobe XD. Even though I teach it all the time and I use it as my primary application, you're never going to hear me say that because I don't believe in that. I believe in using what works for you. The same way I would never go to my neighbor and say, you need to buy a Tesla because I drive one. You can't drive a Honda. That's stupid, right? Right? Same thing. So use what works best for you. All right. So one more artboard. I'm going to duplicate that over. And I'm going to simply move that over here. Again, one of the cool things I love about Adobe XD is that Auto-Animate, you just move things around, you just design your different states. Of course, for projects like this, your artboards are going to get a little bit crazy, right? We've got all these different artboards, but maybe we'll make it easier in the future. But for now, this works. It's pretty cool. So I've got that done. And then I want to simulate what the rounded corners look like. So I'm going to duplicate one more time. And I'm going to start by selecting this XD icon, rounding out those corners like that. And what I can do is I can hide the bounds just to make sure I have a pretty good shape. And that looks pretty good for me. Martin. And I'm gonna move these inwards a little bit, right? So I'm boop, boop, and boop, boop. I'm holding down shift to make sure to move them by 10 pixels at a time. Boop, boop. And you have to boop when you're doing it, right? Boop, boop. And I'm gonna also move this one in, just like that. Bam, perfect. All right, let's wire these ones up. So this one here, after the bounds appear, it's essentially going to move the pointer to that new handle at the bottom right-hand corner. Now this one, I do want Auto-Animate, right? Maybe I'll give it a little bit of a delay, let's say 0.2 seconds. And Laura Mifson says endless fight between Nikon, Sony, and Canon. Absolutely. You know, I switched to Canon a bunch of years back. I'm using the A7R IV right now to film this. I switched to Sony. I love my Sony cameras. This was in the time where Canon was kind of confused about what was going on with mirrorless and stuff. So I want to switch to a mirrorless camera. But Canon now is doing some amazing things. I think it's the R5 and the R6 they recently announced. Those look like fantastic cameras. If I wasn't using the A7R IV, I'd probably try that one out. But yeah, it's the same thing. You know, you have to use what works best for you. Some people, a Sony might work best, or some people Nikon, or maybe they've just been using it for a long time. They're hesitant to switch, right? Same thing. So I'm going to choose Auto-Animate, and we probably don't want, let's try 0.6 seconds. We'll see what that looks like. And what I'm going to do is now, once that one kicks off, I'm going to drag this over. And just for consistency, I may keep these options like this. I can always go back and change those. Destiny says Canon is going crazy. Yeah, they were sleeping for a few years, and they must have been doing some crazy research and development. And all of a sudden now, they're introducing these incredible cameras, which are kind of making me jealous. But honestly, this A7R IV is pretty fantastic. So let's see. Here we go. Whoop. Ooh, fancy. So it is a little bit slow. The first part's kind of fast, but then that is a little bit slow, right? So what I want to do is I'm going to go over here, probably to this one, and just speed this up a little bit. Because it's taking up a much smaller footprint, it's going based from here to there, 0.6 seconds is probably going to look a little bit slow, right? And I may also want to just round this out a little bit more, just a touch. All right, let's see what that looks like. Whoop. There we go. That's a little bit faster. Cody says, whoop. You know what? I haven't done a boop animation today. Hold on. Oh yeah. Boop. Now I need some coffee. All right, so we got that looking pretty good. And we're about halfway through the masterclass, so we're making pretty good time. So after this happens, right? If I go back to Safari, rounded corners, those bounds go away, and then the actual typing process kicks off, right? One more time. The cursor moves, and then typing, right? So let's do that. So right here, the bounds will go away. So essentially, you've rounded out the corners, and then you're deselecting the object. You can press the escape key, or you can move your mouse and click off of it. So all I have to do, because I've organized my layers properly, is simply turn off the bounds layer, and I've deleted it, right? Now after this, we want to start simulating what the typing process looks like. So I'm going to grab the pointer and move it to somewhere about here. Now, to help me throughout this process, I might want to visualize what the actual text is going to look like. So someone's saying, make repeat grid work with components, same way as it works with simple elements, text, image, update in batch. Oh, that would be, so my first answer to that would be nice, right? However, that kind of goes against what components are. You know, components are not meant to. The main component is meant to keep all the other components up to date. So if you think about it, it's kind of working as intended, right? You have a repeat grid and you have a main component inside of a repeat grid. If you were to drag an image into it, it shouldn't update, if you drag a batch of images into it, it shouldn't add all those images. So what I typically do is I create a repeat grid with like a rectangle. I drag images in first to distribute them all, and then I turn one of them into a main component, right? That being said, it would be nice to see some updates to repeat grid to give more flexibility. But the fact that components can be overridden inside of repeat grids is kind of nice. So over here in Finder, I do have some mnemonics that I can just bring in. It's an Illustrator file, but I'm going to bring it into Adobe XD just so I have the actual official text. And the Illustrator file is loading. There it is. I'm just going to dive in here, grab the two text layers, and copy, and boop, paste it right in there. I want to make sure just to make it a little bit larger so that it's basically where I want it when the animation completes. Right about there looks pretty good. I'm going to group these, call this XD, move it below there. So in that case, I kind of want the pointer right about there, right? Now I don't want this to be seen initially, so I want the pointer to go over here, and then the next thing I want is a line. This is kind of like the cursor when you're going to start typing something. And for this, I might want some sort of either a white or a pink of some sort, maybe a white with a little bit of pink in there. And again, I'm overemphasizing things. So I'm going to make this a little bit larger than it typically would be. Make sure it's centered and pop it right about there. I can even round out the corners or round out the caps just like that, just to give it a little bit of style. I'm going to call this cursor. Wow, cursor. There we go. Fancy. And that looks pretty good. Now, you know, going back to what we were talking about earlier about using artboard to artboard transitions for auto-animate and things like that, it'd be absolutely cool. I know the team is working on a lot of the cool things like this, but you know, I have an artboard like this, a 1920 by 1080 artboard and a 1920 by 1080 artboard, and the only change across both of them is adding a little cursor. So it would absolutely, I know some people are gonna ask about it. It would absolutely be a nice change to be able to do things like that without the use of two different artboards. Now you can do it with components and states, right? You can go between, if you want to use a tap trigger. Time trigger is not available just yet. That would probably completely change the game, right? If time triggers were available within component states. But yeah, I think we're going to see some changes at some point to make this specific process a little bit easier. Now, of course, most people are probably not creating video intros in Adobe XD, so the use cases is probably an edge case, to be honest. But it would be nice to have. Is there a shortcut to open folders in the layers panel? So I don't believe there's a shortcut to open all of them at once. But that would be cool. So I would definitely suggest going to adobeXD.uservoice.com. Arrow keys? Does that work? Does it? It doesn't look like it. Unless I'm wrong. Cornell, clarify that. Do you have to press anything else with the arrow keys? If so, I have learned something today. All right. So we've got that done, and now we essentially want the different letters within XD to start appearing. So I'm going to duplicate this one more time. Now we probably don't need the cursor because it's going to kick off so quickly. So I'm going to just hide the cursor. And I'm going to also hide the pointer so we can see the text happening. This first one is going to be the X. And then the second one is going to reveal the D. Boop. There we go. All right. So we essentially have our entire thing looking pretty good, right? And what do we have left to wire up? So we've wired up this artboard here, these two, and we want to wire up this one. And this one's going to be a simple transition. And you're making that coffee look good. It's really good. It's quite tasty. I'm going to do 0 seconds. And this is going to be a simple transition. And then I want to go over from this artboard all the way down to this one. I'm using my trackpad to zoom along or pan along. Now this one I don't want to transition because I don't want the cursor or the pointer just go boop right over there, right? So I want Auto-Animate. I'm going to give it a little bit of a delay. Again, we can always change this later. And let's try 0.4 seconds. And then these ones, we don't want any Auto-Animate on these. And do we want to... This one we probably don't want a delay. Transition, none. And then this one we want a little bit of a delay probably, so the typing doesn't take place too quickly. So 0.2 seconds and 0.2 seconds. So Cornell says it works on Windows. Sometimes when I want to move objects, expand the layer folder instead. That's interesting. I haven't experienced that, at least on the Mac. I will try that on Windows later. All right, let's see this in action. And this should be all wired up. Ooh, look at that. Let's play it one more time. That's just fancy. That is just fancy. And all of that was done in Adobe XD. And of course, like I mentioned, you have to use Artboard, many artboards to make this happen, but you got lots of space. So unless you're doing this massive, 2-minute long intro, you probably have the space. And the team is looking at other ways to increase the amount of space you have on your documents, but they want to make sure that performance is up to par, because anytime you increase the space or you add anything extra, I know the team has confirmed that they're looking into pages, for example. They want to make sure that performance doesn't suffer when those things are added. So yeah, but until then, we've got lots of space. Can the drag end with a bounce? Ooh, Arbor, that's an interesting idea. So yeah, absolutely. So if I hop over here, I can change this. Now, when you say bounce, you're probably just talking about the general feel of it. You're probably, hopefully, not talking about the actual bounce easing option. Because I've talked about this in the past, the actual bounce easing option is not very good. So I'm going to select that and show you kind of what that looks like. Boing. Probably not, right? However, there's a snap option, which I like to call it the safe version of bounce, right? And now, woo, ooh, look at that. Did you see it? It's very subtle. So it's not as crazy as bounce, but if I play it one more time, it's a nice little subtle ending, right? That's kind of fun. I like that. Good suggestion, Arbor. So we've basically covered the entire thing, haven't we? If we take a look at what we have in this video, we've basically done it. Fancy. Now, of course, we have a few more things up here. We have the title of an artboard. I also added my image, because if this intro is used by several people, they might want to show off who is presenting it, right? So for that kind of mimics the co-editing look in Adobe XD. So we can do something like that. I don't have a picture of me at the moment. I mean, I do, it's somewhere. I gotta find it. But what I can do for that is grab an ellipse, draw one out like that. And I might want to, what did this look like? So it's, okay, so basically what I can do is I can add, there's two things I can do. I can either just turn on a border, right, like this. I can set the color to blue and then put my image in the middle. But if I wanted like a border and then a border around it, I can basically have a cutout. So I can duplicate this, shrink that in a little bit, select both of these objects, and then use the subtract option right at the top. And then from here, I can set the fill to, let's say, a color like this. You know what, let's go bold. Let's go nice and bold. We're gonna go for a nice reddish pink. And then the border on the inside is gonna be white. Now, what you might be noticing is that the white border is clashing a lot with the artboard and even the canvas in the background. So I might just wanna add a little bit of a shadow. Very subtle shadow. I talk a lot about shadows. Use very subtle shadows. And then on the inside, I'm going to add a spot for my face. Now, I don't have a picture of my face readily at the moment, so what I can do is I can use a plugin. So I'm going to use the UI Faces plugin. It's a fantastic plugin. This person does not exist. I love this because the people that it generates do not exist. And if I go ahead and select photos, all of these people here are not real people. If you want to go to thispersondoesnotexist.com, it's a ridiculous service. I think it's by NVIDIA. It's an algorithm. And it generates these people. And this algorithm has gotten better over the years. Initially, it was a little bit strange. Even here, you can kind of see, whoops, there's a little bit of weirdness on her teeth. But for the most part, these look like actual people. But they're not. They're fake people. Apply. Andre is saying, would you please ask my good friend Alex to finally try Adobe XD? I have no ideas how to convince him. He's tracking the stream right now. Alex, try Adobe XD. I mean, it doesn't hurt to try, right? Try a project, have fun with it. letsxd.com has a lot of videos on some of the cool things you can do with XD, but try it. If it's not for you, then it's not for you, but try it, right? Gotta try everything once. So there's this guy that doesn't exist. It's kind of crazy. Could it be possible a masterclass on UX rules like forms, how to utilize forms? That could be interesting. That could be quite interesting. All right, when you click on the search field in the layers panel and press tab, you'll be able to navigate through the layers using the arrow key. Really? Nope, doesn't work for me. Maybe it's a Windows thing, who knows? So we've got this guy up here that doesn't exist, and now we may want a title. So maybe this video in particular is using scroll groups, or I can just type in scroll groups in Adobe XD, which, Alex, if you're still watching, scroll groups, fantastic new feature in XD. I just released a video on 5 ways you can use scroll groups. Fabian's saying I had XD29 installed. So now scroll groups is working on Windows. Great. What do I think about inner shadows in XD? I would love inner shadows in XD, but I don't think it's a feature that should necessarily be prioritized over some other features like updates to components and insert top secret features that are currently being worked on right now. But it would be nice to see in XD, but I don't think it's a priority. And I'll just go for San Francisco Pro Display. Maybe I'll bold this a little bit, or I'll, I don't know, light. Interesting. Maybe I'll make it a little bit larger so it can be seen. Now what you're going to notice, right, is that if I press play on the second artboard, because it's only present on the first artboard, it kind of goes away. So here's what we can do. We have our title, we have our little guy looking pretty good. What I want to do is actually select all of these and turn them all into a single component. So I'm going to press the plus button beside component up here. And what this will allow me to do, in addition to being able to copy this and just paste it on all the other artboards, right? Deselect that one, paste, there we go. So this will now make it present on all the artboards. But because it's a component, when the time comes that I want to record a new intro for a new video, all I have to do, or replace this guy, all I have to do is dive in here and just stacks in Adobe XD. Maybe I want to dive in here, go to my plugins. Let's find a new person that doesn't exist, right? Because I love this crazy algorithm. And let's say, this person. Maybe this person. I just need one photo. This person. There we go. Apply. So I've put her in this little bubble. Maybe I want to change the color of the bubble. Now it's blue. And if you take a look, I go over here, it also changed, right? So that's one of the benefits of using components. Of course, there's many benefits of using components, but otherwise I would have to update every single artboard with the new picture, the new text, the new everything. But now we just have to replay it, right? There we go. So I don't think I have time to go over the other elements, right? Let's go back to Safari, and you kind of see over to the left over here, I got like this fake assets panel, and also have a fake properties inspector over to the right. This was pretty easy to create. It was a little bit time consuming, but it was quite easy. So all you have to do is on one of them, right? There's a bunch of elements up here, and to keep it very simple, all I really did was I just used a rectangle and I dragged one out. So if I go to the assets panel, actually, you can see there's like an assets label at the top. Instead of typing assets, which is kind of distracting, I can just use a rectangle and put some of that information up there. I can even round to the corners just a little bit. Let's go for 2 pixels, right? So we've got that. Then we've got a little search icon right over here. Maybe I'll make that square. And then basically the search field right over here. I'll make that a little bit longer. And you can just go through. Those are a little bit small actually. So I'll just make them a little bit larger. Again, we're all about overemphasizing things. And then you've got two little icons over here. I guess one little icon over here. Make sure it's 16. There we go. You actually have two icons up here. 1 and 2, right? Again, I'm not going to go through the entire process, but that's essentially how I created that section over to the right. You can also use repeat grids. So if you just have an object here, let's say you want to mimic what the colors or character styles look like, you can drag out one of them. So this is, I'll just round up the corners a little bit more. Let's go for 8 pixels. This is one of the colors if you add it as, you know, this thumbnail mode. So if I have a character style, I want to add it here, or a color, right? You can kind of see how things are looking. So these will be for the character styles. And I'll just drag out a title right there. There we go. And what I can do now is just use a repeat grid. So I have a few character styles going down the artboard like that. I'll make this about 8 pixels. And I can do the same thing for components. So I can just duplicate this like that, right? And then for colors, it's basically the same thing, except we would use squares. And you can drag those out. So we have a bunch of squares going across our artboard just like that. We have a few colors, maybe add one more. Now this kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier about repeat grids and components and things like that. By default, repeat grids update the entire thing. So if I change this to one color, it's going to update across the entire repeat grid. However, if I turn one of these into a component, here's the main component, which will update all the other instances. But if I wanted to just maybe make this one blue, and maybe make this one, I don't know, what other color do we, oh, that hot pink. That's a good color, right? And maybe this will be a darker color, for example. Maybe we want a white. It's a little bit difficult to see, so we can put a little bit of a border. So if we go to the main component, add a little bit of a border on the inside, right? Very subtle border. And there we go, right? Fancy. I can do one more color if I wanted to. Let's go for a nice purple. There we go. Perfect. And I can move some of this stuff up if I wanted to, just like that. Great. All right. Designer's Desk says, love those small tips and tricks we got on your video, every video and live session. I appreciate that. Thank you. Now, just to make the process, again, a little bit simpler, I'm actually going to grab the elements from the completed document. Let me go ahead and I'm going to group these and just hide them for now. I can go ahead and paste. And here are the ones from the previous document. Although, hold on. So I've got oh, there we go. It didn't bring over the, oh, I know why. Okay, doesn't matter. So let's go ahead and bring this one back. And I'm going to grab the properties inspector over here, copy and paste. And look at all that. Look at all these little fun little dots that we've got floating around. And I can make the properties inspector a little bit larger so it fits all this stuff. And this was done the exact same process as the assets panel that we just went through. Just a lot of manual labor, making all these squares and rectangles. And again, I didn't want to go for the actual elements because I found it would be probably too distracting. If the main focus is this area here where the logo is being drawn out, then we don't really want people to look over here the entire time, right? Copy and let's go ahead and paste it in there. There we go. That looks pretty good. Just so we have consistency. Perfect. All right, that is looking pretty good. Now, of course, you might also want to make your assets and your properties inspector components as well. So if you do need to make changes, maybe to the color or whatever it might be, you can absolutely do that. So I'm going to make this into a component. I can turn this into a component, and now I can copy these. I'm actually going to go, you know what? I probably don't need to delete those because they'll just override them you'll just put them on top and paste. There we go. And bam. Oh, there was a little bit of an issue there. Whoa, what is going on? I must have not copied it on one of them. Interesting. So we've got that. We've got, oh, I see. I know why. I know why. I'm going to just pop this. I'm going to copy and I'm going to paste, move it to the back, and now we should be good. All right. Copy one more time. I'm going to select all these artboards, paste, and that looks a little bit better, doesn't it? Beautiful. Fantastic. Okay. Martin is saying, is there a plan to have an Adobe XD app for the iPad that also supports the Apple Pencil? Another one of those things that would be nice to have. We speak to a lot of designers all the time, from big companies to freelance designers, and the consensus, from what I've heard, I could be wrong, is that there probably wouldn't be enough of a need for, and there wouldn't be enough usage to really dedicate the resources, and it would cost a lot of resources to create an iPad app for the, XD app for the iPad. Now, I could be wrong. I would like to see it one day. But at the moment, with all the other things the team is working on, it would definitely pull away from some of those more important features. But it would be nice, maybe one day. So the big question is now, in the last 4 minutes, is what do I actually do with this thing, right? So there's two ways we can actually record this. We can press the play button at the top, and then on the Mac, there's this record icon right up here that will allow you to record the preview and save it directly to your computer. Now, if you're going this route, what I would suggest is on the first artboard in prototype mode, set the time to like 2.5 seconds, right? Something like this. So that'll give you enough time to press play and then press record, just so the animation doesn't kick off before the recording actually starts. The second thing you can do, by the way, if you're on Windows, because of restrictions, we can't provide in-app recording, so use Game Bar, which is built into Windows anyway, so you think it's Windows G and you can record the screen. The second thing you can do is you can use an application like OBS or ScreenFlow, for example. So I've got ScreenFlow here. I'm just going to create a new document, 1920 by 1080, and what I can do is I can just record my screen, right? So it's recording right now, and I'm going to go ahead and press play on the preview. Now, in this case, you probably don't need the 2.5 second delay, but it's going to record. There we go. I'm going to stop the recording. I'm going to add it to this document, pop it on my artboard like this. I'm going to go to the section, and this is not a ScreenFlow tutorial, obviously, but I'm going to go to the section where it kind of starts, right about there. Crop it a little bit. And of course, I want to make sure that the entire thing is visible. So in that case, I'm just going to make that a little bit bigger. Make that a bit bigger, move this up so I cut off the preview window title, and there we go. Now I have our lovely little intro. And if you caught my recent video, which I uploaded to YouTube, I'd recommend you check it out. It's pretty fun. There was a little bit of a 3D effect on it, and that was done in ScreenFlow. You can also do it in many other applications, but they have these options here where I can just kind of rotate this a little bit, and I can also make this larger. So it kind of starts off a little bit rotated, maybe not too much, maybe something like that. And make sure to crop that off at the top, but I do want the author right in there. And what we can do from here is we can essentially set up a transition. And again, this is not a ScreenFlow tutorial, but I can add an action in ScreenFlow and basically have it go back to 0, zoom out a little bit, and make sure that everything is nicely in frame. This is just a little bit of a behind the scenes of how I work on a day-to-day basis, like that, right? And I can just increase this so that essentially over the course of the intro, the animation and the 3D effect are taking place. There we go. And that, my friends, is how I created this intro using Adobe XD. Someone's asking, is ScreenFlow Mac only? It is, but Windows does have its fair share of screen recording applications. OBS is one of them. It is free. There's, I'm blanking on the other one, but there is another one that a lot of people do use for Windows. Ooh, I don't remember. I know Wirecast is more for streaming, which is what I'm using right now to stream this to all of you lovely people. You can use that for screen recording as well, but there's plenty of options out there. So one more time, and there we go. Now, of course, in ScreenFlow itself, or in any sort of video editing application, you can also add in elements like this, right? So you can just use the animation from XD and then add in stuff like this if you don't want to make sure to update it in XD and re-record it every time. That might be worth it. But Streamlabs, yeah, that might be it as well. So that is going to do it for today. Hope you all enjoyed this masterclass. I may not be back next week. I may take a week off. I'm going to announce why in a little bit on Twitter probably, but I hope you're all staying safe. Big thank you to Cody and Cornell and Sarah and Umacorn and Martin and Destiny and everyone else who has joined me today. Be well, and I will see you all next time.